Hello, everyone, and welcome inside Take to Take here. Patrick Tallon, as always, joined alongside my two co-hosts, Nick Robinson and Luke Burrows, for episode number 51. I say this every week, but it feels like we haven't done an episode in a while. Are you guys with me this time? Because it doesn't feel like it's been a while.
I mean, we're kind of back into the weekly schedule, so
Yeah.
I'm kind of in the rhythm.
I feel like with the fact that there's now, 4 or 5 games we're each watching in between episodes now,
Yeah.
it makes it feel like a lot longer than there is because there's a lot more talking points that come out of that. And I feel like we have to catch up on that every week now. So that's been interesting.
A lot more talking points, and I think that's probably why this one feels longer than usual. It's because a lot of stuff happened last week. Some trades, a big trade, actually one of the biggest blockbusters we've seen in the NHL in quite some time. And to touch on more recent news, actually, Jim Rutherford, general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins, retired all of a sudden, and he just kind of cited personal reasons. Obviously, Rutherford took a lot of heat for the offseason he had, trading good draft picks who would end up being good prospects, and Hollander and Amirov for Kapanen, signing Mike Matheson. And I think he took a lot of heat. I'm not saying this is why, obviously, but he cited personal reasons. Hopefully there's nothing too serious. Hopefully there's nothing going on with his health, but this kind of came at an odd time. What do you guys kind of make of the situation here?
I mean, it's tricky because personal reasons are personal reasons. You don't really know, but it's a bit odd. Because I know on I guess yesterday's broadcast, yesterday's Hockey Central broadcast, they were saying he was involved with the Yannick Weber signing at like noon yesterday. Whether that, I'm sure the decision to resign wasn't made solely after that, but it's just interesting how quickly it happened. And then I'm sure we're going to get into it as well. The potential list of replacements is a hot topic right now. So I'll let Nick say his piece before I kind of get into that, because there's some issues I have there.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty good tee up, Luke. Obviously, Jim Rutherford deserves a lot of respect because the Penguins won 2 Stanley Cups, quite frankly, after their window was supposed to be closed. And they really did that on the back of just smart transactions that were made by Jim Rutherford. And, obviously hiring Mike Sullivan played a crucial role in that. But it is fair to acknowledge that he has played an equally significant role in downgrading the team since that, obviously with some of the additions you mentioned, Patrick. And I'm going to pull up this list here. This was a graphic shown on Sportsnet of some of the possible replacements for Jim Rutherford. And, you look at the screen here, you got Tom Fitzgerald, Ron Hextall. That would be interesting given his history with the Flyers. Jason Botterill, he was formerly of the Pittsburgh organization, had a very difficult time in Buffalo. He was supposed to be the guy that turned them around. John Ferguson Jr., he's with the Bruins right now. And Dale Tallon. And oh boy, what can you say about Dale Tallon, what he did for the Flyers? I know Peter Chiarelli was definitely thrown around this one too. I'm not wild about the replacements being sort of floated around here if I'm a Pittsburgh fan, Pat.
Yeah, no, this, like, again, we touched about this with coaches. Whenever someone gets fired, we're going to look to all the unemployed guys. And this summer, before Washington fired their coach, we looked at Laviolette, we looked at Mike Babcock, we looked at Gerard Gallant. And it's no different for GMs. The only thing is my knowledge about some of the GMs that are available might not be as high as my knowledge of some of the coaches. That's the only thing. Looking at that list, it's kind of tough to make an argument for some of them. And if I had a better understanding of the GM market, I might have a better idea. But yeah, Nick, you touching something good there. And that's that Rutherford had a sort of a weird tenure, because give the guy credit. He did everything every single year to maximize the window and get the best out of Crosby Malkin. Every single year he went to the podium. He said, our goal is to win the Stanley Cup. Our goal is to surround these players with the best players possible. You know what? We will sacrifice the future to win right now because we have 2 of the best players in the cap era. We're gonna do it. And he did that. And a lot of the times, the 2 cups in 3 years was it back-to-back years?
Back-to-back years.
Yeah, back-to-back, plus the one in 2009 and 10 or 9, whatever. I'm getting my dates mixed up. But he made a conscious effort to win with that squad, and he made good moves. And then near the end, we kind of saw some questionable moves. Obviously, the one reacquiring Kasperi Kapanen, giving up a good prospect or a pick, and then prospect Rodon Amirov. It's kind of weird, but I'd also like to give him some credit. He was one of the first GMs who actually looked into analytics. Pittsburgh was one of the first teams that actually got involved in hiring analytic people, consultants, looking at the graphs, looking at the data that we pull up a lot on this show. So kind of a weird ending, and if it wasn't just to change personnel, hopefully everything is okay with Jim Rutherford. Well, I think Luke, you wanted to mention something.
Yeah, so that replacement list, and we had this conversation recently. I don't remember what the topic was on. I think it was on, because I don't remember who's been fired recently. Anyways, though, you kind of mentioned it. Like, it's just the list. Whenever a coach or a GM gets fired, the list for potential replacements is just the same rotation of five guys, and it's just like, why can't they expand their potential suitors list? Like, there's so many qualified and I'm sure effective names out there, and it just frustrates me that whenever something like this happens, it's just someone from that rotating cast just ends up slotting in anyways, and I'm assuming that's what's going to happen here as well.
And that begs another question: is what's the plan for Pittsburgh? It should be to win right now, but at the same time, you don't want to rebuild, obviously, with this squad. But at the same time, you've sacrificed a lot of futures, some really good picks, some really good prospects to bolster the roster right now. Whoever comes in is in a peculiar situation. There was an article on NHL saying this team has to win now. They're in a must-win situation in part because of this. Nick, I'd imagine you'd think that the goal, the motive should be to still win the cup. But do you think whoever comes in might take a little bit of a step back, maybe move on from some assets and try to get some futures here?
I can't see how you can, just because of the players that they already have in that system, what is around there. And they've already given so much up from that future core already. So I think if you're Pittsburgh, you're going to look at what won you the 2 previous cups. And that's just making smart 1-for-1 moves, just the little transactions that help grow your hockey team. And if they're going to bring in somebody with sort of an eye to make good bets on players that could work out, there's no reason why pretty much a repeat of what Jim Rutherford was able to do in 15-16 couldn't happen again. So, I'd go for it again if I'm Jim Rutherford's replacement. I'm just looking to make small, smart moves that can benefit the hockey team now, and using Crosby and Malkin while you can.
Right.
Yeah, I think, like, I agree with Nick. I don't really think you have a choice coming in with the team you're given. You kind of have to run with what's there for a few years. Because obviously, like we keep reiterating, Crosby and Malkin, they're still very good. They're older, but they're still very good. So you don't really have a choice.
Yeah, it would be almost insulting, regardless of what Rutherford did, was to come in and say, well, no, we're gonna completely not blow it up, but you know what I mean. Anyway, hope all is well with Jim Rutherford. There is an interim in Pittsburgh right now, obviously. Let's get to the bigger news. And this was one of the biggest blockbuster trades we've had in the last couple years, involving 2 really high picks. So if you've been living under a complete rock, this shouldn't be news, or this should be news. But the Winnipeg Jets acquired Pierre-Luc Dubois, a 2022 third-round pick, in exchange for Patrick Laine and Jack Roslovic. We had talked about Patrick Laine, and we actually, probably the 2 biggest stars we've talked about on most of our shows have been Patrick Laine and Pierre-Luc Dubois, looking at the situations with their teams, with their coaches. Are they happy where they are? Could there be a deal there? And we finally saw it. There was a bunch leading up to this. I thought the Laine situation in Winnipeg kind of got better. It didn't seem like there was as much drama there. Where on the flip side, in Columbus, you had Pierre-Luc Dubois benching Tortorella benching Pierre-Luc Dubois for an entire period after some really lazy plays. Regardless, they made the trade. I'm curious to hear what you guys think, because I might be the minority here on who I think won. But just real quick, who do you guys think won the trade? Nick, I'll start with you.
I think short term, you're looking at a win for Winnipeg here. I think Dubois is the better player right now. However, anytime you're giving up 2 assets when you're Winnipeg to acquire that player, you've got Roslovic, who's very much a wild card in this trade. He's a boomer bust pretty much at this point. Patrick Laine, we know what he is. He is one of the purest talents in the league, in terms of he's so one-dimensional. All he does is score goals, and he does that exceptionally well and a lot better than some of his peers. But it almost feels like, to me, Laine's got that maybe one step above that he can hit possibly that I don't think Dubois can reach. He's got a higher ceiling. But I think if you're looking right now, next couple years at least, this trade serves Winnipeg well. And I think Dubois is more of that sure bet compared to what Laine and Roslovic are. So I've given the edge to Columbus here, or sorry, to Winnipeg here. I think they've got the better player out of it. So
I
that's
agree.
sort of my initial feel.
And I think the key thing to kind of acknowledge is, yes, I think we kind of agree. Laine can hit that just that one step above what Dubois can do, and Dubois being a player in the stage of his career where he is, he's you'd have to think he's kind of around wherever his ceiling is. But I think from if I wanted to play it safe, I would rather be Winnipeg right now for the reasons Nick mentioned. Dubois, he's better now. It's tricky to send a player like Laine to go play under Tortorella. You can't deny that there are some players that just don't. I mean, we've seen it in this trade. There are some players that just don't mesh well with his coaching style or whatever you want to call it. So I think the higher ceiling on the trade would certainly be the return Columbus got. They have a higher potential for winning this trade, but in terms of playing it safe and just getting a pretty solid asset, you'd have to say Winnipeg. But it's funny, and you kind of mentioned this, Pat. It's funny that when all the armchair GMs were looking at these two separate situations in Winnipeg and Columbus, everyone's saying, well, just swap them. Like it makes sense. And it's funny because a trade like this, like usually teams would take advantage of the Pierre-Luc Dubois situation and how that's going in Columbus. And they kind of take advantage of Columbus and offer a pretty lopsided deal. But you've got two isolated situations that, I guess happened at the perfect time for each other, and you see a pretty unique trade. I don't know how often you'd see that.
Yeah, especially the fact that they were picked 2 and 3 in that draft. So comparing the players, for me, I think Columbus got the better player by far. Even on Patrick Laine's down year, in 2019 and 2020, he still had 28 goals. He had 63 points in 68 games. This is a fantastic hockey player who can score goals at will, unlike most other players in the league. Arguably easily top 5 release, probably top 3 if you wanted to look into that. But I really think Patrick Laine, the way he can score goals, the kind of player he is, I can't look at Winnipeg and think that they got the better end of the deal. What I will say, though, is I think Pierre-Luc Dubois fits into their lineup much better than Patrick Laine does in Columbus. I think you look at Columbus's lineup, you look up down the middle, you have Alexander Texier and Max Domi, who Domi, I've said before, I'm not really convinced of his ability as a centerman, and then Jack Roslovic hopping into the third line. How Laine fits in with those centers, they're all fine playmakers, but Laine, someone who isn't that great defensively, probably needs a little bit more of a defensive presence beside him. So that's sort of my issue with the trade. I'm seeing a ton of people think that Winnipeg definitely, they fleeced Columbus, and I can't really see that. Just the type of player Patrick Laine is, I think he's the better player. And even if you looked at the draft, if people even had Dubois' ceiling as being what it is now, I still think Laine's ceiling is that much higher. And I think a lot of people talk about Dubois as if he's some two-way center. He's not. He's never really been. And not that he can't become that, but his defensive numbers have never really been that good. You can look at JFresh player cards. You can look at the Viz that we pull up so often on this. He's really not some two-way center. He's a really good offensive center. And I think he probably addresses a need on Winnipeg more. But if I'm building a team, I'll be picking.
You'd have to think there's more risk for Columbus here, though, wouldn't you?
Well, I think and what his next contract's going to be if he stays and if they get him surrounded with the right players. Yeah. But I don't think there's risk in acquiring a pure goal scorer because we've seen what he can do. And we saw it at the start of the season, right? He opened almost, was it a hat trick against Calgary and on the second or third opening night? 2 goals. And at the same time, if we want to get into this, there's obviously some stuff going on, or there was, with Laine in Winnipeg, and he still came out and played hockey. That was still an issue from the playoffs with Tortorella and Dubois kind of acted like a baby the way he was playing. Do you guys agree with that or no?
No, because I don't agree with the forcing players to play when they've made it clear they don't wish to play for that team. I think for the signs were pretty much there when the Dubois contract negotiation went as deep into the offseason as it did. The season was practically on the verge of beginning and he wasn't signed. So I think from that point on, I think Columbus really should have just sat him out and looked to either make a deal quicker then, because obviously when they had a bit more urgency to make the deal, they got it done pretty quickly. From that one infamous shift night against Tampa Bay compared to when he was traded, I think that was an overall turnaround of 24 to 36 hours. Some should have made that effort to trade him when he made it sort of clear that he wanted to be traded, as opposed to, making this a pretty dramatic thing as it turned out to be.
Right. And I think it's worth noting Pierre-Luc Dubois did not publicly request a trade. John Tortorella went on Columbus Sports Radio and said, yep, he wants out, and was talking about it. And I think they both made good points. Tortorella was saying, look, it's really hard to coach a guy who doesn't want to be here. We put a lot of effort into developing players, and hearing they don't want to be here sucks. And I can imagine that as what it's like being under Tortorella at the same time. And I'm not looking to pick anyone's sides, but I do think, there was obviously some stuff under Line, and obviously it dissolved, but he still played hockey. And I get what you're saying. Luke, do you have any other thoughts on this?
Well, I just think we
drama?
don't know, right? Like, there's so much here,
right,
especially in Columbus, and we don't know. So it's hard to say. It could very well be Dubois getting put in a really bad light unfairly, or it could be the total opposite of that. We just have no idea what conversations are being or were being had in Columbus or Winnipeg. So,
right. Exciting though. Blockbusters are fun.
I think it's the biggest. Do you think it's the only bigger trade of the year? I could very well see it being the only. Like, I'm sure there'll be some minor ones, but I could very well see this one being the only, half. This is big, but the only half decent trade of the year.
What would have been like a big? I'm trying to think. I'm just blanking on all the big trades. That
when
happened.
like recently.
And let's say up until a year ago, what were like some significant?
I've no idea what
they've all been
a year ago. I couldn't even.
I'm just thinking like free agent signings, Pietrangelo signing and Krug signing, but I'm trying to think of like a big trade. I don't know. That kind of ties into our next topic. Quite the segue, Luke, is Jarmo Kekalainen he's had some blockbusters. He is not afraid to pull the trigger. I think the big one that a lot of the time people deemed a perfectly flawless trade was Seth Jones for Ryan Johansson. And this is one where honestly, neither player panned out to what they were expected to be. Johansson's kind of a 50, 60 point center. Seth Jones puts up points as a defenseman, but for my money, he is not what people think he is, just from what I've seen and what I've read from him. Jay Fresh had a fantastic article about how Jay Fresh is not, or Jay Fresh talked about Seth Jones. Jones is not the shutdown elite top pair defenseman that everyone thinks he is. He's a really good defenseman. Anyway, I wrote some trades down here. Let's look at Seth Jones and Ryan Johansson. Who do you think, and that was with Poyle and Dashiell, by the way, who do you think won that trade?
I'd probably still go Columbus did. Johansson, for all, sort of the concerns you have about the specifics of Jones' play, I think a lot of those concerns are existent with Johansson as well. And he's just not consistent enough. I still like Seth Jones. I still think there is a bit more to his game, even though there definitely are some flaws that don't get talked about enough. But I still like Seth Jones, the player, more, I think.
Yeah, both players certainly have their aspects that that I don't think were expected, when they were starting their careers. But when you just kind of look at the players they are, I'd have to agree with Nick. I think Jones is just sort of he's kind of rounded himself out better. So yeah, and that trade at the time though, like when that trade, what was the date on that?
January 6th, 2016. So
wow.
So what?
Yeah. So I just think at the time I think it would have been a bit trickier to answer, but now, and it's not at all like one is miles above the other. I think just if I'd more confidently say Jones, though again, both certainly have their drawbacks for sure.
And yeah, that's the thing. You look at the time, Poyle and the Predators, they had Shea Weber. And
Nashville was good then, right?
Nashville was good, and not Nashville could afford to give up a defenseman to get a center. And you look at Columbus, I think they had Nick Foligno back then when he was playing center, at least in their top six. He had a couple really good seasons back then, so they could afford to give up Ryan Johansson. I just think there was so much hype around these players, and that was seen as a flawless trade. Looking back, it's a blockbuster at the time, but it's not really that big of a deal considering neither players have panned out.
Johansson's contract sucks. Is that correct?
If I remember, a lot of
good. I think it's pretty. I think it's like Duchesne's.
Yeah, a lot of Nashville contracts aren't great. Okay, let's do one more real quick.
You know what? Actually, hindsight on those ones, because a lot of Nashville contracts we thought were really good at the time.
Yep. All right. Well, there's a list actually. There was like a top 25 of Yarmo's biggest trades and stuff like that. But here's one from 2017. Brandon Saad, Anton Forsberg, a 2018 fifth round pick to Chicago in return for Artemi Panarin, Tyler Mott. Luke, you're familiar with him, and a 2017 sixth round pick. Picks aside, Saad and Forsberg for Panarin and Mott. We have to say he won this. You get Artemi Panarin.
He got one of the very best wingers in the league to play for Columbus. And one of the things you can't underrate here is that besides, obviously, they probably didn't win as much as they wanted to with Panarin there for the couple of years. But you have to look at how relevant Columbus was in terms of the broader scale of the league for at least a couple of years, because, it's not every day you can just bring in a superstar. With all due respect to Brandon Saad, Artemi Panarin just is that much more of a step up from him.
Yeah.
And that was pretty big for Columbus.
Yeah, I remember watching that series against Tampa. Those were fun playoff games with Panarin, and they really went off. And I don't really watch Columbus.
Was that the sweep?
And that team was fun. Anyway, Anderson Domi, too soon to tell. We've talked endlessly about that. We don't have to get into that. All right, so let's move on and touch on the Vancouver Canucks. Luke, your team, they had a 3-game stint against the Montreal Canadiens. I won't gloat. Montreal handed it to them, though, getting points in every single game.
They didn't win every single game, though.
No, but they still got points in every single game. They got 5 of a possible 6 points. So can't be too upset as a Habs fan. Tyler Toffoli is looking like a fantastic addition. Anyway, I won't get too much into it. However, not to rip on the Canucks, and I'm not just doing this because I do a show with a Canucks fan, but Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes struggled, and they struggled immensely. In a lot of the games where Vancouver put up a lot of points, Pettersson did not register them. He didn't register a shot. Hughes is getting a lot of assists. He's struggling a lot defensively. We talked about their struggles. What do you make of it? You kind of thought that Pettersson was in his own head. Do you still think that? And what do you think is causing this?
I'm not worried about them long-term, career-wise. I'm not at all concerned. Am I concerned that they're doing this at the beginning of a 56-game season? Yeah, a little bit. It's kind of the timing isn't.
How can you not be?
That being said, I really do think it's confidence issues in 2 young guys, and I think the room is quite shaken up from last year. And we can go back and listen to the episodes, I think in August when Vancouver was doing well in the playoffs, and I was raving about how much that the room just the team just seemed to gel together with that lineup, and it was pretty torn apart over that shortened off season. And from a just on paper standpoint, again, I'll stand by it. I don't hate it. I don't hate what happened, but from a intangible standpoint, and this just seems more apparent as every game goes by, there's clearly been a big hit. And I know Kevin Bieksa said this on a broadcast a few days ago. I don't know how legitimate this is, but he said when Hughes was struggling, who would he go to? When Pettersson was struggling, who would he go to? And it was Chris Tanev and Jacob Markstrom. So it's tough. And it's clear that the team just hasn't been able to get their stuff together. Those 2 guys their confidence was just in the ground. I'd like to think Pettersson's kind of getting back into it now, especially I think no offense, Nick, but I think a 3-game stint against Ottawa was just what they needed. Because I think they've outscored 12-2 over the past 2 games. We'll see what happens tonight, but I don't know. It just kind of sucks to see, because I was so happy with how the team looked last year, and now it's just it doesn't at all look the same. So I don't know.
Well, surely it can't get any better for the Canucks, really, eh?
Yeah.
Right now. Yeah, no, but I will say on Pettersson, though, I don't think in the 7-1 game he looked particularly good.
No,
I didn't really notice him, which was bizarre for a game your team's up 7-1.
And even last night.
At points last night, right? He didn't look great. He got a good power play goal, which was, by the way, I'm not sure if there's an NHL challenge that exists for when the boards are flashing, the strobe lights going, and there's smoke being sprayed out before a goal goes in. You said, Luke, I think that was some sort of foreshadowing. But I don't know if there's some sort of rule in there that Senators could challenge that, but I've never seen that before. But I don't know. Maybe
that's actually
a push he
happened
needed,
in Rogers
right?
Arena
From the
before.
strobe lights. Just give him that little bit of push, a little bit of confidence.
Yeah.
Well, if I could talk about Pettersson real quick, because it's one thing to have your confidence shot, and every team, especially young players, they go through that. And it seemed like Hughes was still playing with confidence for the most part. He was still skating the puck up. It was just he seemed to overlook his defensive play. And you look at last year, I was actually looking at his RAPM charts before the game. He was good both offensively and defensively. This year, it's just only offense, and he just seems to have completely forgotten about the defensive game. But with Pettersson, he made 2 really bad turnovers against Montreal, one against Scott.
Oh, he made a million. Yeah.
And then there was the Toffoli one that led to the goal. And even last night, it's one thing to not play with confidence, but it almost seems like Vancouver isn't keen on using him as much. They were showing some stuff on Sportsnet, some power plays. They're working at, first of all, Vancouver's power play looked much better, but they were working mainly with Bo Horvat and JT Miller and Quinn Hughes on the left side of the half wall, basically leaving Pettersson there that entire time. And even when he, for a good chunk of it, at least against Montreal, would you say that's fair?
Yeah, but can I just say, I wouldn't even say Hughes. That cycle, the cycle game right now between Horvat, Besser, and Miller is insane. That is where Horvat is getting his goals. That's where Besser is getting a lot of his points. That has looked really good, not even involving Pettersson. Just hangs out on the far wall.
And it's a good thing that you don't have to, like Montreal gives the puck to Shea Weber every single time. It has not worked for a long time, despite the better options they have. This is almost kind of a good thing in a way that you don't have to use that one weapon you have in Pettersson. You have Miller, Besser, Horvat, Hughes who can work it down low. But it's their hesitancy to not even pass it to him. Okay, so even when you can work with Hughes and Horvat and Besser down low, it's a really good thing. But just not even using them is what's kind of cause for concern. They haven't really given him the puck that much. Even when he's getting it,
he doesn't look like he wants it though.
Exactly, and that's the thing. It's really weird. And then you look at last night's goal. Sportsnet was talking about it in the intermission. That sort of, it was almost a partial breakaway, but then it became a 3-on-1. Any other time, if Pettersson's going down that side with the puck, he should be shooting and making a deke. It almost seems like he doesn't even want to shoot.
Well, that's the thing.
If he made that back pass and it didn't release,
JT
Miller almost missed that. Mm-hmm. If they didn't score there, then they're thinking, Pettersson, why aren't you shooting the puck? So this has to be a confidence thing. But I just want to know what you kind of make of all this.
It's all over the ice. He just does not look like he wants the puck, especially in the Montreal series. I think the Toffoli giveaway was the one. He was just right inside the blue line. He tried to cross it and he just shot it right into the Canadian stick. I don't think that was Toffoli, but it's in last year, if he was in that situation, he would have done something really cool with his feet and come out the other side with the puck, and everyone would have been classic Pettersson. But now he does not want the puck. He shoots it away, and Tyler Toffoli goes down and scores his 8th goal of the game. So I think it's not an issue of him not being used. I think everyone I don't think that power play unit is oblivious that he's not on his game right now. Like I said, Besser, Miller, and Horvat clearly are on their game. They can just have fun with it until Pettersson figures it out. And then when Pettersson figures it out, you've got 4 extremely lethal weapons on the ice that you're going to score every time. So I don't know. I think I have all the faith in the world that he will figure out whatever this is. And then you won't have to worry about giving him the puck, because he'll just be normal Pettersson.
All right, Nick. Well, let me ask you here because we talked about this, I think, at least a couple episodes about the offseason, about Jim Benning as a GM. I've been very vocal. I don't think he's a good GM, even his drafting record. I know people give him a lot of credit. I don't think he's been that good of a scout, if you want to call it. There's been numerous reports about the picks he's made that have worked out. That he didn't even want Elias Pettersson apparently. Back in his draft year, you look at Quinn Hughes completely falling to them. That was a good pick, obviously, but Benning loves the ECHL guys, but a lot of their really good European picks were from some of his associates and the co-scouts that Vancouver has. Regardless, we talked about the offseason Vancouver had, and we had kind of beat around the bush, and we sort of realized he had a bad offseason, in my opinion. Losing all those guys sucks, and not finding viable replacements for them. Giving Jake Virtanen a contract instead of Tyler Toffoli, and then coming out hearing that there wasn't even communication with Tyler Toffoli, and they didn't even tender an offer. There was nothing really clear there. Same thing with Jacob Markstrom. It seemed like they were too caught up in Jake Virtanen.
I don't think that's the issue, though.
Well, you look at if not Jacob Markstrom, you look at Tyler Toffoli, and they talked about it on Sportsnet how essentially there wasn't really any communication with Tyler Toffoli. You gave up a lot of assets to get him, a good prospect in Tyler Madden. You have him for 16 games. He plays excellent. He's excellent in the playoffs. He says he wants to come back. He was exactly what Vancouver needed to sort of relieve the pressure off of their elite offensive pieces, and they didn't communicate with him. They never really tendered him an offer, and then all of a sudden he's thinking, well, okay, I'm going to sign somewhere else at a very reasonable cap hit. And all of that happening had Canucks fans fine. It seemed like more on Twitter they were more vocal about wanting Benning gone. Losing Markstrom fine, and you can have faith in Demko and Holtby, who've actually been okay this season. That's fine. Tanev hurts. You don't really get a viable replacement for his role, or at least a veteran presence. You lose to Foley. They're in a really bad situation. And Luke, you had mentioned you were okay with it, given how he couldn't really have done anything else too crazy, and that's fine.
But hold on,
because of mistakes he made, he didn't do. Yeah, right.
So, yeah, exactly. I don't think lack of communication is where you should be pointing the finger right now. I'm sure if Benning thought he was going to be able to make a deal, he would have communicated. I think, but I'm not at all letting Benning off the hook. I think the issue is you've got $15 million tied up in Louis Eriksson, Tyler Myers, and like Jay Beagle or something. With that kind of money, you signed Toffoli, you signed Markstrom, you signed Tanev, you probably signed Stetcher as well. Maybe you at least signed Markstrom, Toffoli,
close to all those guys.
Tanev, yeah, like it's a situation where you look at it like, and I know hindsight is 2020. The Louis Eriksson signing at the time, if it was $6 million over 3 years, I'm fine with that. Even if he plummeted like he did in that first year, but $6 million over 6 years is extremely dumb. Same with Meyer. It's the term for a lot of them. It seems Benning's conceding on both term and money, when in reality, maybe say, yeah, we can give you $6 million, we'll give you 3 years. Same thing to Myers. I don't know the exact number on Beagle,
let me get to my all right.
Continue.
I'll get to my question for Nick here, because they said there wasn't communication, and the money that could have been used to re-sign Toffoli was used for Virtanen and Gaudette. It's not like it's not like they were completely up against the cap. Gaudette hasn't lived up to his play in college, clearly, and Virtanen has never really been what people expected of him. Toffoli was like the perfect fit for Vancouver system, regardless. Luke, are you at a point, or Nick, sorry, do you think at this point the Canucks should look to move on from Jim Benning?
Yes, I think they probably should have looked to move on from him back in 2016. Like literally, I feel like I haven't gone really a stretch in my entire hockey fandom where I thought Jim Benning was really the guy to solve things in Vancouver. Yes, he's made a couple of decent draft picks here and there, but his pro scouting is completely flawed. And I will touch on another team whose pro scouting I think is completely flawed after this, but Jim Benning is definitely one of them. I think his how he evaluates players, how he addresses Vancouver's needs, it's a bit of a mess. And then he finally hits a home run, like you said, on Toffoli. And because of other mistakes he's made, he doesn't have the money to re-sign him. I think Vancouver really just needs a fresh set of eyes on this to sort of guide them out of this trouble. Maybe a look to a bit more analytical type decision making, just to make smarter moves when you're looking at bottom six guys like Beagle, because Beagle isn't not good because of his contract. He's not good because Jay Beagle's not that good. Like, that's one player that really sticks out in my mind. You just need to look at areas of your lineup that you can be getting for cheaper. And when you're committing multiple years in term, multiple millions of dollars to guys in your bottom six, or, not very good defensemen, it becomes a bit of a mess, like we've seen in Vancouver. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Pettersson and Hughes. Both of them are coming up here soon. They're going to need to move some money around, because right now on paper, I don't think you're able to keep all three of those guys.
And I just like to, I don't think you signed Toffoli with what you signed Virtanen and Gaudette for. I just like to make that clear.
Well, what Virtanen's making, what, a little,
the two together is 3 something. It's Virtanen's making 2.55, which I like. Gaudette's making 950. I don't think you're signing Toffoli for
Toffoli's only making 4.4.
3.5. I know Toffoli is not taking 3.5.
No, but he's only making in Montreal 4.4.
I know, but I'm saying in any case, whether he's dealing with Vancouver or Montreal or any other team, I don't think there's any scenario where Tyler Toffoli takes 3.5 is what I'm.
Yes, but a GM can clear $1 million in space. You can move some stuff around. You can, right?
Okay.
Because in that case, if you're doing that, you probably don't sign Braden Holtby. You probably sign like a Thomas Greiss or something like that. You take sort of the $1 million off there.
And I will say, like, Holtby and Demko haven't been great, but they haven't been the problem. I would say, like,
but the first few games, it was like you were waiting for one of them to kind of catch on, and then you're going to ride them for a bit, and looked like neither of them wanted it. I think Demko, again, sorry, Nick, it might just be because they're playing Ottawa, but I think Demko's kind of coming out of it now. So if he's the number one, I'd probably prefer that, to be honest. But
all right, so just before we move on to the next topic, fire Benning, just give me a yes or no.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's not really clear. It seems like you're like, well, because like
fire Benning. I just think not for the reasons that people are getting upset about now. It's like this has been an issue for a while.
Fire Benning shouldn't be a new thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, fair enough. All right, well, let's touch on the Ottawa Senators, Nick. And again, I've watched most Sens games. I've been watching most of the games in the Canadian division. The first couple games I thought the Sens played were really exciting. We saw Tim Stützle. We saw the game against Toronto that they won. That was a ton of fun. And we talked about it, I think, first or second week. If Ottawa brought in too many veterans, Eric Goodbranson, you had all the guys surrounding the young players in the top 6. You had Logan Brown not making the team. You had Branstrom not making the team. And we were kind of thinking, yeah, you know what? It might be too many veterans. And now, because I'm seeing Sens Twitter, obviously it's the people that were on our show before, being very vocal about this lineup having too many veterans. And what started as a fun, what would have been a fun, but I don't know how to say this, a fun season, but still not a good team.
Expectations.
Yes, kind of just went to, it almost seems like last year all over again. What's your take on Ottawa right now? Is it clear they have too many veterans?
We'll start. This is already way worse than last year, because I had 0 expectations last year. I expected them to be bad. There was no immediate help on the way in terms of young prospects. So you just sort of grind through it. This year, you look at the team, you're thinking, okay, you've got Tim Stützle stepping in. You're going to have Drake Batherson, Josh Norris stepping in. Hopefully Eric Brandstrom, Christian Wolanin stepping in. You're not getting a lot of that this year. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, the spat with Colin White and DJ Smith. That's still ongoing, DJ Smith finally threw Colin White on the second line last night. He went from healthy scratch to second line. And Luke, I don't know if you noticed at all, he was obviously one of Ottawa's better forwards last night. He looked great. And, when you look at the amount of veterans they have on the roster, it's not that they just have a bunch of guys toying away in the top or in the bottom 6 and on your third pairing. You've got lots of veterans in high pressure situations. They've had Artem Anisimov covering top 6 minutes at center, either him or Derek Stepan, both of which have been a disaster. You've got Cedric Paquette, Austin Watson on the fourth line. Again, Austin Watson's maybe actually been a bit better than I thought he's going to be. But Austin Watson's not somebody you want on your team very long term, and he's signed for a couple of more years after this. Again, it's a disaster. Braden Coburn has not worked. Matt Murray was supposed to come in, sort of get some confidence back. You know, he's 26, but he is a veteran in the league now. He's been around long enough. He's at least a veteran on a decently young Senators team, but he has also been a disaster to this point. So it's not even that they have too many veterans. I think at this point, it's I'm more so looking at the veterans that they brought in aren't even playing well. And I think to me, that is the insane part in all this, because I'm not going to mind if they bring in a bunch of veteran guys and they're at least playing okay and the Senators look a bit better. This team looks far worse than it did at any point last year, which is mind-boggling to me, given the investment that Pierre Dorian put in a lot of these players. It's crazy.
All right, a question.
Yeah.
I from what I see on Twitter and what I hear just around, Sens fans are upset. Can I ask, who are you upset with? And then who is kind of the general Sens fandom upset with? And then I have a follow-up.
I would say the general Sens fandom is upset with DJ Smith. I think he's, I've criticized DJ Smith multiple times, be it on the show, be it online, in articles I've written, tweets I've put out. I've criticized DJ Smith a lot for his player personnel decisions. Nikita Zaitsev, who's had actually a pretty solid start to this year, has, last year he was a disaster, but was still logging a lot of minutes. He puts a lot of trust in guys in the bottom six that are a lot more physical and maybe not actually good defensively. So then you couple that sort of with the confusing scratching of Colin White and some of the guys like Anisimov and Stepan that he's playing in the top six. He's rightfully earned a lot of critics that way. But to me, I actually look, and like I alluded to earlier, the players that DJ Smith is playing shouldn't be on the team in the first place. And to me, that goes directly to Pierre Dorion. DJ Smith is his second head coach in his tenure as Ottawa GM. He was the guy that hired Guy Boucher. He is now the guy that hired DJ Smith. And unfortunately, I'm starting to see a lot of similarities in the way that they're deploying players and the way that they are, sort of trying to shape their roster on a nightly basis. But, Pierre Dorion can set up DJ Smith for a lot more success by not bringing in loads and loads of veterans on, multi-year deals, or just for no reason at all, by giving up picks. They gave up a third round pick for Austin Watson. They gave up a second round pick for Derek Stepan. Pat, I don't even need you to chime in. Tell me how bad that is, that you're giving up picks like that for guys like that. Pierre Dorion's not setting up DJ Smith for success, and DJ Smith is not setting up the Senators for success on a nightly basis. They go hand in hand. I'd point a lot more of my gun at Pierre Dorion right now.
I think so. Yeah, I think I agree with you, because I see this online, and it just seems like it's misdirected, because Ottawa's not a good team. They're not supposed to be a good team. And I feel like coaches generally get targeted when a good team isn't playing very well, right? But Ottawa isn't that. Ottawa's a bad team.
They're that.
They're an up and coming team, but they're a bad team as of now, and they're not playing well. So and they're playing in a very tough division. So if I were a Sens fan, I wouldn't be worried. I'd just be like, yeah, I mean, this is expected for this year. Just got to move through it and, dream.
But I'll tell you why I do worry, because given what Pierre Dorion has said and been vocal about in the media with, justifying a lot of the transactions he's made. One guy I haven't even touched on is Evgeny Dadonov, who's supposed to be really the one good signing out of all this. And he hasn't, gotten off to a very good start at all in Ottawa. But the one thing that really does concern me is with the moves Pierre Dorion has made, he wasn't making a lot of these moves and at least justifying it as, we need to fill out the roster. We're still aiming towards next year. He justified a lot of them in saying, we think we're going to be a much more competitive hockey team this year. And Ottawa has been so far from that.
Yeah, go ahead, Luke, if you had a little.
No, I get that. But I think just looking at it objectively, it's not a good team in a really good division. I don't know. I wouldn't be worried. I think it's just where the team is right now. And I mean, when you look at it in like a very close up scale, like losing 7-1 and then 5-1 to Vancouver, who apparently isn't very good. Yeah, I guess that's a cause for concern. But just in the grand scheme of things, if Ottawa doesn't have a good year, I think that's to be expected. But I mean, obviously, you know the situation far better than I do, as a closeted Sens fan. But I think the anger is I don't know, out of place maybe.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is last year we gave Dorian full credit for how he handled the deadline. He acknowledged the situation. He knew the team could not compete and contend. You got rid of Pajot. You get some picks. You pick 3 and 5 in the draft. Stützle was there's nothing wrong with the Stützle pick at 3. Sanderson at 5, that's debatable, but you still get a really good defenseman. You get a top defenseman. You get a top forward. Later picks are questionable, whatever, but we still give Dorian the credit because he understood the situation the team was in. And we knew he'd get some veterans. I just didn't know, and I don't think any of us did, we didn't expect him to get, kind of trigger happy that now that he was given the green light to spend money on veterans. And it reminds me kind of like Toronto, when Toronto was rebuilding before, when Lamoriello was still in charge, they had Komarov and they had Matt Martin. Those were veterans to surround the young players, but those veterans at the time were still playing somewhat productive hockey. Komarov was, at least, I don't know about Matt Martin, but Komarov was still a good hockey player. But then you get guys like Eric Goodbranson, you get Braden Coburn. Stepan clearly is not working. I know he took a dumb penalty a couple games ago, costing them. It's just not working. And then you kind of have to look, okay, well, did you rush too many young guys in here just to surround them with bad players? And that kind of leads me to my next question before we move on from this. And I'll just direct it to you. Well, both of you, I guess. At what point do you consider sending Tim Stützle to Belleville? Logan Brown's not playing. Josh Norris has been a pleasant surprise, especially for me.
Yeah.
But you guys wouldn't? Would you guys send him? Would you guys look at in any way Stützle? He's been playing fine. He's been good. He hasn't been fantastic.
For what reason? Like for his development?
If he's not getting,
I think from what I can tell, he's pretty developed, right? Like
he's a
doesn't
very
look like a Jesperi Kotkaniemi situation to me.
Well, hey man, we can have
unnecessary
don't even
shots.
Yeah, such an unnecessary shot. You know how many man, I'm already mad. I don't even want to do this show. I'm not in a good mood. You know what, man? Patterson didn't get a point in a 7-2 win against the Sens, and he was -5.
Too busy looking
I hate plus minus, but he was -5 in like a 6-goal game that Canucks scored. So that's pretty pathetic as well. All right, if we want to go there, I'm really happy. Whatever.
It's
anyway.
the heat of the Canadian division, baby.
Yeah, we have to do this. I think the Habs play the Canucks in like 6 days. Like we have to do it all over again. Yeah. Anyway, okay. Let me get back to the point of my question here. All right. Tim Stützle is a very smart player. Very, very, very smart player. He knows what to do at both ends of the ice for the most part. He has been fine first couple of games. He got injured, and Nick, I don't know his ice time the past couple of games. If it's been relatively high, if it's been low, let's say it has been low. Let's say he doesn't start.
I think it was the lowest amongst Sens forwards last night. It was one of the lower ones.
Okay, that kind of fits to my question then. Let's say it gets lower and he's not being played a lot. He's not playing well. Ottawa's not doing well. Do you at any point consider saying, hey, take a couple weeks in Belleville? It helped, and Luke can poke fun at Kotkaniemi. It helped Kotkaniemi. It did. He came back and played well.
Kotkaniemi isn't as good as Stützle.
No, but I'm not comparing the two players.
Well, you are though.
No, I'm not comparing the two. I'm not comparing those two players. I don't think he's
comparing the two.
I'm saying when Kotkaniemi, who was how old is Stützle 19?
Stützle just turned 19.
Okay, Kotkaniemi was 19, by the way, when he got sent to Laval. So they were two young players who were struggling, or Kotkaniemi was struggling at least, and he went to Laval for 2 weeks, and it helped him out. If the Sens can do the same with Stützle, would you do that?
I don't think you can take that off the table right now. Sorry, Luke. I'm gonna take the lead here because Patrick's been trying to ask me this for about 5 minutes. It feels like you can't take that off the table right now because his ice time isn't exactly up there with some of the superstars. I don't think you can dismantle the first line of Tkachuk, Norris, and Batherson right now to put Stützle there and give him better line mates because that line is pretty much the only consistently good Senators line right now. I think the solve at the NHL level is you have to play him on a line with Colin White and Evgeny Dadonov. I think that's the easy fix at the NHL level because right now he's playing with Tierney and Brown. With all due respect to Chris Tierney and Connor Brown, they're fine shutdown forwards, but they do not have the skill and the speed to keep up with Tim Stützle. And that has been painfully evident in a couple of Vancouver games here. And he's shown flashes like he did in a couple of games against Toronto of that individual moment of pure brilliance that, Ottawa has lacked for so long at the forward position. So I think you have to consider putting him in Belleville and considering it better for his development at this point. If he's going to be playing with two defensive stalwarts and forwards, you need to surround him with better line mates in Ottawa. And while the forward core is not great, there are better options there in Ottawa. I'd even call up Logan Brown and put him with Stützle at this point, because you just need to find a better fit for him than two defensive guys. You need players that can keep up with him. Logan Brown's the guy I want, but I will take Colin White. I will take anybody else with Stützle except for Brown and White, or Brown and Tierney. Sorry.
Yeah, we almost made it. I'm with Nick. You bring up someone who's capable of playing, a skilled guy capable of playing with him in the bottom six if he's not going to play in the top six. And also, I was thinking about this the other day. A veteran I always thought Ottawa would look to bring in, and this in part could be just me obsessing over Montreal's cap situation, but Paul Byron seems like a good fit to go to Ottawa. Defensive forward. He's a very fast forward, great penalty killer, but he has some upside. He scored 20 goals a couple years ago. He'd be someone who'd be great alongside.
You see, that's a veteran you pay a pick for. You don't pay a pick for an Austin Watson or a Derek Stepan. Those are players that you get paid to take.
Exactly.
That's the point that I made with Dorian earlier. I'm okay if you're bringing in veterans that are good. But I have no tolerance for bad veterans that you paid and gave up to get. Right. That's what has really irked me about the Senators so far this season. We'll see where it goes, but I think just my last note here on the Senators, I think there are definite changes coming back. Definite changes coming when they are back from this Western Canadian swing. We got a game against Vancouver tonight. They got 2 against the Edmonton Oilers, which should be an absolute comedy show going at this rate. But I think once they land back at Ottawa, I think you're going to see Eric Brandstrom, Logan Brown, possibly even somebody like Alex Formanton straight back up to Ottawa.
All right. Well, let's we almost made it a full show without Luke having to poke fun at Kotkaniemi, but
it was relevant. I had to bring it up.
It wasn't
personal.
Well, it feels personal. Anyway, let's real quick before we wrap up here, because there's a Habs opening game I need to watch in about 10 minutes. Opening home opener. Anyway, Jake Muzzin and Matthew Tkachuk. This happened 2 nights ago, I believe, maybe 3 nights ago. Regardless, Toronto beat Calgary in regulation. Calgary was pushing the last minute, weren't able to score. At the end, when Toronto's celebrating, Muzzin's on the ice actually, Tkachuk's on the ice, and Muzzin has the game puck and he just flicks it towards Tkachuk. Tkachuk tried to hit it out of the way, missed, made him more mad, and then went up and started fighting Jake Muzzin. And then, if that wasn't enough, going to the bench, he slams the bench door. He did some weird thing and punched the wall. He was upset. And this is Matthew Tkachuk for anyone who's seen him play. This is the kind of player he is. This kind of guy he is. I don't know what my question is, but I guess, what are your thoughts on this situation? Is that
I think first off, we should mention this is pretty much born out of the fact that Matthew Tkachuk had a questionable incident at the end of the previous game when some fans are saying he purposely sort of jumped down on Campbell. I'm more 50.
I don't think he did
on that. I don't know that he actually meant to jump down on Campbell. Yeah, I don't think he did either. That's questionable. He does questionable stuff, Tkachuk. So I think when stuff like what happened with Muzzin happens, he sort of brings that upon himself. That being said, I don't know how smart that is of Toronto to do when they've got so many more games against Calgary. And I think, a lot of these Canadian division teams, when they're having these heated affairs, Ottawa certainly had its heat towards that sort of series with Winnipeg. I'm sure there's going to be some with Vancouver tonight. They have so many more games against each other. So I don't know what is going to happen in the rest of those games. I'm sure it's going to be pretty ugly the next time Toronto and Calgary hit the ice together, especially now throughout the rest of the season, because they are now on the Matt Tkachuk hit list. And we see what has happened with teams like the LA Kings before. So that'll be interesting to see.
I think those two situations specifically, I don't think Tkachuk meant to to knee Campbell in the head. I could go on about that, but I won't. And then the situation with Muzzin, I think those were separate things. I don't think he was happy about getting a puck shot at him. But I think his outbreak in the hallway, I don't think that was related really to getting a puck shot at him.
Right.
That doesn't make sense. I think that was probably related to a bigger issue, something game related.
I saw a suggestion. Maybe it was because his teammates didn't exactly get as heated about it as he did.
Or have
I couldn't see that him doing all that just because someone flicked a puck at him.
Right.
But,
and that's the thing. And you have people saying that this is a total scumbag move from Tkachuk, and it kind of is. Let's not pretend for a second that if Matthew Tkachuk flicked the game puck at a Toronto Maple Leaf,
don't even
they would not be. They would. And this is the thing. I get it. I would be livid if a Leaf did that to a Hab. I would be pissed off. But but comparing the moves, what Tkachuk did was worse. But come on, anyone would be pretty irritated. It's like when Suzuki tapped Carter Hart's head in the playoffs after scoring a goal on them. It's just like stuff like that just irritates you. But it's part of the sport. It's the reaction.
I think most people would get irritated and then just keep it to themselves. But if it happened to a Leaf, it'd be like, it'd just be all over everything. Everyone would just be so upset. But
how will this affect Freddie's next contract anyway? But yeah, that's the thing. That's part of hockey. It's irritating, and if it irritates you, it works. And I think it worked in Toronto's favor because it was Matthew Tkachuk. If you do that to Johnny Gaudreau, I don't think you're having the same reaction. Anyway, that just about does it. This has been a fun episode. A lot of stuff going on. A lot more games in the Canadian division. We are honestly just getting started. The amount of games we have to play against our respective teams. There's still plenty to go, but that just about does it here for us in episode 51 of Take to Take. For Luke Burrows and Nick Robinson, I'm Patrick Tallon, and we'll see you next week. Take care.